Now I have 28 minutes to go through some of the key announcements in the Microsoft 365 platform within last week. So the Microsoft Build is really the developer-oriented conference within a year. And sure, within this time in Build, there was a lot of low-code, no-code development as well, but it is development. So we're making things happen. It's extensibility. We're adjusting things. And it's getting more and more, let's say, connected between each other across the stack, which is kind of a cool thing. So it's not a bad thing to be a low-code developer. You are a developer, and then you can be a low-code developer in one project, and you can be a pro developer in another project. So which is a great thing as well. Now the key announcements as we go through the key, let's say, moments from the last week, again related on Microsoft 365 platform. Also the key number which we shared was that we have 270 million monthly active users in the Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft Teams is really our, let's say, the primary UX and the user interface, how we're surfacing all of the application and where we're focusing our message. Now, this does not mean, by the way, that, for example, Planner or SharePoint or OneDrive or any other things would be less important. It's just that those are actually quite often being surfaced through the Microsoft Teams. Even in this call, we are in Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft Teams is kind of a fundamental part of our day-to-day work. And through the Microsoft Teams, we access then the information with Microsoft Graph. So that's why we're always kind of focusing on the Microsoft Teams and numbers. Now, on last week, we also talked about, it's not technically a new concept and a new idea. We introduced this a year ago. We talked about the kind of, in quotes, a new application type, which is collaborative apps. And that's really what it means, is that we're kind of integrating directly to those collaborative features, which are all part of the Microsoft 365 platform. And as we are explaining what it means and what are the layers, this is the typical, let's say, architecture slide what we're showing. So we'll surface these collaborative apps in our Office application, in the Microsoft Teams, or in your application, which is a cool new dimension in all of this discussion. So it's not just Microsoft application. You can actually surface those collaborative features in your custom application, even though that's running outside of the Microsoft 365. But then that's being connected to Microsoft 365. We have the developer tools and APIs. We're using Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code. Of course, GitHub plays a big role as an location where we can do project management, issues, pull requests, development, all of that stuff, and also sharing our samples. And of course, Power Platform is a big part of our development story as well. Data and insights layer, we have the Microsoft Graph, which is by far, well, that is the data layer to access all of the information in Microsoft 365. Dataverse as an option, and of course we can store the data in Azure as well. And all of this is then being secured by the Microsoft Cloud capabilities, so identity within Azure AD, and then that provides the security and compliance tools which you can take advantage of all of these applications which are being built using this collaborative app capabilities. Now, as I mentioned on this slide, so we're kind of thinking this in a bit of a new dimension. So I bear a small warning. I'm not a marketing person, so I'm going to explain this using the engineering terminology, so not necessarily about quote unquote what the marketing message was. But we kind of introduce a new layer here. So we want to meet users in the flow of the work. So we want to make sure that you as a developer can implement extensibility and applications which are attaching to the flow of the work. So the users don't need to jump to another application, another URL, another location. The application which you bring is actually coming to the user, which is a great way of thinking this. So of course, most of us spend most of our working hours in the Microsoft Teams. Well, I don't know about you, but I spend most of my time at least in Microsoft Teams. So you can easily introduce your application in a Teams. But then the new dimension here is really the fact that we can introduce those applications and kind of at the Microsoft 365 in your app. So you can integrate more easily through APIs, through controls, through connectivity, to chats, to calls, to in the meetings, with Graph APIs, you can do operations in the Microsoft 365. So really big focus area on is not necessarily forcing application to be in Teams. Rather, let's actually put the Teams and pieces of Teams in your application and make your life easier. And as part of this journey, as we're making things easier and easier in the future, we then announced the preview of Teams.js 2.0 SDK. It is still in developer preview, but what this one enables us to do is that we're able to use the same Microsoft Teams applications and surface them in multiple locations. So we can actually surface the same application in preview status in the Outlook and in the office.com, and of course in the future it's intended to be extended from there. So you can, for example, build, in this case we have a messaging extension, Soho Projects, which is actually being surfaced in the Microsoft Teams or in Outlook. So it's one implementation, but the same implementation is available in both applications. So you can easily access the information regardless are you in Teams or are you in Outlook or in office.com or in other locations in the future. But how would I actually create this? So what is to do the cool? So we have a new SDK, but does it make our life easier? Well, we also introduced the general availability of Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code. So with Teams Toolkit Visual Studio Code, we can start implementing this kind of Teams SDK v2 applications, which are then extending and available in Microsoft Teams and in Outlook more easily. And that there is a really easy getting started journeys there. With a few click of a button, you can actually create a sample solution or start from a sample solution and start extending that. And so it's a really, really convenient way of building applications for Microsoft Teams. This does not necessarily mean that if you have an existing implementation, existing integration, all of that's going to go away. None at all. So you can actually integrate Teams Toolkit to your existing application. All of your existing applications will still work. Nothing is going to go away. Teams Toolkit is just there to make it easier, especially when you start creating a new application. So it gives you a nice wrapper on top of the Microsoft Teams and manifest, and then the application and F5 debugging on all of those things. And we also introduced or announced a preview of the Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio 2022. And this is right now, I guess it's scheduled, I guess it's safe to say, it's scheduled to go GA later this summer, which is a vague enough timeline, right? So I'm not promising anything specific, but later on this summer, it's going to go in GA. And that's really bringing the Teams Toolkit capabilities then in the Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Code. Now, we kind of have covered already that we have this kind of symbiosis also with Power Platform. So more and more you see investments in the Power Platform also towards Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Teams especially. One of the things with where we are investing heavily is collaboration controls. And this is really, really cool feature. So we're making it super easy for the Power Apps developers to take advantage of this collaborative features in their Power Apps. So here's a quick demo on building a Canvas application in Power Apps. You can see that Canvas has a kind of a tabs on top of it and says new inspections and general task meeting and files. In the left components bar, you can actually see the collaboration in preview, those additional controls. And those are the new controls. They're not necessary and they're not available for you right now, but they will be coming relatively soon as well. The basic idea is that we make it easier to make your Power Apps pretty and connected. So they're almost like the Craft Toolkit controls, but really specialized for the Power Apps and taking advantage of those same learnings which we got from a Craft Toolkit as well. So all of this is highly connected throughout our internal messaging and internal planning. But key point here is, again, you can make it really, really easy to connect to your Microsoft 365 data just with these controls, and they will make your application look pretty without any further configurations and options. So there's a lot of ready-to-use capabilities within those controls by default. So super, super cool, make it easier to build really engaging Power applications. Sorry, Power Apps is the right way of saying that, not Power Applications. Now, I'm gonna not focus too much on the Power Platform side, but we did announce, of course, you've probably seen this already, new Power Platform logo that got a lot of attention. And really the key new feature in the Power Platform side is the Power Pages. And this is a kind of evolution. It's based on the Power Portals. It's an evolution on top of it, and it makes it easier to build public-facing websites with modern, secure, and responsive websites which do scale. So it's all based on the Power Portal capabilities behind the scenes, but it's a modern kind of a layout and modern capabilities on top of that. Now, because we wanted to focus on this call more on the platform side of the things, I'm not going to deep dive on the new announcements on the Power Platform. We're going to call out a few specific things related on Microsoft Teams and Graph and Viva on what's happening. So a lot of me talking, but I guess that's my life. We Finns, we are so silent and settle. Now, let's talk about a bit on the Microsoft Teams app model updates. So there are certain updates. We kind of mentioned the key updates there. So with Microsoft Teams, there's a lot of things which you can do, and we keep on evolving those capabilities. So you will get additional features and capabilities. But this time we did not announce new object or component type, so to say, because we have really well set up of features and capabilities already in Teams. We keep on evolving them. But now we're looking into extending those things to be available across Outlook and Office.com. And maybe soon later on, well, obviously, it's logical that it's in the pipeline in other areas as well. And right now we are starting with personal applications and personal apps and search-driven messaging extensions, which are then being supported to be also exposed in Outlook or Outlook and Office.com. So you can access the same application from separate services, which is really, really cool. I'll come back on some of the questions in a second. Now, here's an example of the SurveyMonkey, and of course, the SurveyMonkey can be the same application, can be then surfaced in Outlook or in the Office.com, but it's the same surface, same extension, same application, and you're as a developer, you can define on which hosts or which services it will be supported and how it will be supported, and then that basically enables that functionality to be available within that service, which is really, really, really cool. Now, other things which we mentioned last week related on the Teams integration. So the Loop components, we've been having these for a while, which is really, really cool. So they are the real-time collaborative platform, which you can use from a developer side as well. So the Fluid framework, which is powering Loop components, is now G8, and the Fluid Azure Relay is G8 as well, starting from build last week, which is really, really cool. So we're starting to be able to build your applications or integrate these kind of really runtime, immediate integrations and collaboration capabilities within your apps. And we also announced that you can actually take advantage of those load components in adaptive cards, which is a new feature. So as you post, for example, adaptive cards from your bots, you can actually have a loop component. And then the loop component can be modified or accessed through multiple different channels. And again, the same loop component can be accessed, for example, from Teams and in email and in other locations as well in the future. So you can update them simultaneously the same content throughout all of the people who are accessing the information, which is really, really cool. Now, as said, I'll try to come on all of the questions a bit later. I have a few slides to go through still. I want to call out a few things. So Microsoft Teams framework, so TeamsFX is going to partly go in GA. Well, actually, TeamsFX, to be explicit, went GA last week, but there are certain tooling which is still in preview. So TeamsFX is a Teams development framework, really targeting on making it to Teams development easier. It provides NPM packages, NuGet packages. It provides us a CLI to make deployment of our solutions easier towards Microsoft Teams. So we can do a scripting, automation, CDCI with that CLI. And then we have the IDE extensions, so Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio 2022, which are what is IDE in English? Anyway, development environments. What is
Integrated development environment.
Integrated. Thank you, Brian. Excellent. So, but we have the Visual Studio Code, and we have then the Visual Studio as the development environments. Thank you, Jim, for sharing that as well. Massive blackout. Now, the Teams Toolkit CLI. This is actually kind of a nice picture. You can see that there's a set of those commands. So you can create a new application. You can add features to the application. You can add capabilities. You can do all of that automation in the command line to make things happen. So that's really, really cool. And then on the Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code, will give you an easy access directly on these panels to create your application, add features to the application, editing your Teams manifest file, provisioning to the cloud, and that, by the way, includes also provisioning to Azure pieces. So not just to Teams app catalog, but also the Microsoft Azure pieces, like let's say Microsoft Azure SQL or Azure Functions, and all of that could be part of the solution. And it's all getting bundled and deployed as a one step forward within the cloud, which is really, really cool. So we recommend to have a look on this. And as mentioned already, the Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio is in works as well. It's going to use the CLI behind the scenes. There's certain NuGet packages which are not quite yet to be announced to be ready for GA, so there's still work to be done in here. But that's planned to go GA as in generally available later this summer. Something else what we announced related on Teams and development, something which is actually kind of cool. So now you have the application, you really worked hard on that application and you want to make actually money with that application. We have 270 million users in Microsoft Teams and you want to make money with those people. Well, we offer you a monetization platform. And as part of that monetization platform, we did announce general availability in-app purchasing, which is really, really cool. And then coming soon, integrated license management. But let's focus on the in-app purchase a bit. What does it actually mean? As I'm acquiring the solution or adding the solution might have a free tier, but then if I start using advanced scenarios, it could actually look like something like this one. So it actually says, oh, by the way, we have this professional option available for you, and click a button in here and you are able to upgrade to the better license of this application. And as I click that upgrade today, it will then spawn or open this pop-up from where I can then choose whatever the options are. And of course, me as a developer, I control what are my offerings, how much they will cost, and all of that stuff. We just help you to surface that information for the end users in Microsoft Teams. And as an end user then does the selection and does the checkout and potential credit cards, exchange, all of that stuff as part of this, there's a way of then showing the different messages and acknowledging that within your application. And then you can, in your application, you are aware that the user has acquired whatever the licenses they have actually acquired from the offering, which is really, really cool. Now, a few more things. I wanted to jump on the Microsoft Graph updates. A lot of stuff in the Microsoft Graph as well. The one slide which I always love to show when somebody's asking, okay, Microsoft Graph, it's an API. Well, it's a bit more than that, actually. It's a lot more than that. Of course, it's all about data access and getting the information available, which we have in the Microsoft 365, which is a lot of data. And there's so many APIs, so many capabilities available. But I love this slide because this explains what the Microsoft Graph is all about, and then we can talk about what are the new changes. So first of all, we have the REST APIs. So the REST APIs are there for you to access the data and modify the data in Microsoft 365. But maybe you want to add a lot of data in Microsoft 365, or maybe you want to read a lot of data from Microsoft 365. You want to mass update something or mass analyze some data in Microsoft 365. Those APIs are not designed for that. Or maybe you want to surface your local LOB data in Microsoft 365. Those APIs are not designed for that. Those APIs are for data manipulation in a let's say not in a mass level. Whenever we talk about bulk access and information, then we have the connectors, which are there basically for data ingestion, enrichment, and indexing. So you could index your on-premises data for Microsoft Search. You could index in other areas. You can push that data to be available to the Microsoft Graph surface. And then if you're looking into really accessing a lot of data through a bulk data access, you will take advantage of Microsoft Graph Data Connect. And in all of these areas, there's, of course, a lot of new announcements available. All of that, of course, available from the Graph portal, which we mentioned already earlier in this session by Robert and Lewis. But a few of those things to call out in here. So in the Graph Data Connect, which is all about the fact that I'm mass bulk editing or bulk reading the data from Microsoft 365, there are new connectors which are available for preview, which is the group conversation, Viva Insights Analytics. is now available in here, so you're able to actually access that in Viva Insights data. And of course, in the future, there will be other Viva elements as well, more features in the SharePoint, because SharePoint is the storage of all of our files and information there and sites, and then you can access the meeting transcripts as well. And then there will be a lot of additional things in the future as well. So but already a lot of this data, what we have in the Microsoft 365, can be mass or bulk accessed using the Microsoft Graph Data Connect. Also on the Graph API surface, there was a lot of updates. The main updates, just to call out from a Microsoft Teams perspective, is the new Teams Graph APIs related on creating a chat, sending a message, and list the chats and get messages and create subscriptions. And all of this is kind of enabling you that scenario where you can integrate or you can start a discussion in your application rather than forcing the user to go to the Teams. Maybe it's a website and you want to start a discussion from the website. Well, in that case, maybe people have access and take advantage of Azure Communication Services, which is certainly a great option as well. Now, on the Microsoft Search side of the graph, so to say, well, how does the Microsoft Search relate on this? Well, it's all about those connectors. How do we get the data to Microsoft Search and to the Microsoft Graph, which then makes it available to be exposed through the search. There's a lot of improvements here as well, so making it easier to access your line of business information or your business data across the different applications which you might be using. And as we've been seeing throughout the spring, we've been having preview discussions this already. We are releasing the SDK for creating graph connectors, so making it easier to develop those connectors to the endpoints, whatever is available, whatever the information is that what you need to be able to access. So again, that's giving you the insights for option to, for example, index or crawl data from your line of business application, for example, in on-premises, and then you can access all of that from a Microsoft Search from a single UX, which is really, really cool. And then there was a lot of other Microsoft Graph updates. All of the so as an example, updates on the portal, which we already mentioned today, SDK updates on the Kyoto, which is a code generator for next generation open API based SDKs. So that's available now. Microsoft Graph Toolkit updates. There was a new Microsoft Graph learning path that's available, and much more. And again, I would go to the graph.microsoft.com to have a look on those. And then as a final section, pretty much on schedule. This is pretty amazing. A few updates on the Viva Connection and SharePoint framework. We didn't really focus on build around those announcements for Viva Connection and SharePoint framework, but there is a new version coming out for that relatively soon. So there was an on-demand session in build, and it was mentioned in Jeff Teeper's keynote and the blog post as well. So the SharePoint framework, together with Viva Connection Toolkit, will have a latest version in 1.15, which is scheduled to go out in June. Today is the last day of May, so it is coming relatively soon. Now, I can probably spell the beans that we're looking into having the release candidate out later today or tomorrow related on SharePoint Framework 1.15, which is then targeting Microsoft Teams, Viva Connection, and of course SharePoint Online. The newest big things are the Microsoft Graph SDK v3 support, and then the new customizer for edit list and library forms, making it possible to override the list experience within a SharePoint Online or in Microsoft Lists. So really, really cool stuff. And then as part of the build announcements, we also talked about our future direction where we will have bot-powered Viva Connection cards. So this is kind of a good example how we're combining the technologies across the different products and services. So the Viva Connection cards can be still, of course, in the future implemented using SharePoint Framework, but as there are a lot of ISVs who have existing bots and bot framework investments, they would love to have a capability and support of creating those Viva Connection cards using bots, and that will be available later as part of the most likely 1.16 preview release, which is scheduled to go out 2 weeks after the GA of 1.15. So a lot of stuff. And as mentioned already by Brian, as we went through the news, there's a lot of news articles available. I will paste in all of these links right now on the chat, which is a lot of them, but you're able to follow up on them afterwards, depending on the areas which you are interested in. Good. Brian, there was some discussion on the chat. Hopefully, were you able to follow up on that? Any specific questions which I should jump in before we close up? Maybe we'll have 1 minute.
I'm taking a look through. I answered one or two of them. There was a question, I think, a little bit earlier up about, we talked about the Teams apps being able to go into Outlook now. There's someone asking for an update on the SPFx version of that, which I know was in preview at one point.
Yeah, so the SPS preview, which we did related on Office, and that preview unfortunately didn't result that to get released now. But however, what we're doing, we learned from that as a Microsoft, as a one Microsoft, we learned the best practices. And now what we're doing is that as part of this Teams and Outlook and Teams V2 SDK effort, gradually we are getting that same support in the SharePoint framework. So what we're looking into doing gradually, again, not in 1.15, is that whenever you're packaging your SharePoint framework solution, you will actually get a Teams zip file. And inside of that Teams zip file, you will have the manifest, you will have the images, and then the SPPKJ file. So we're all unifying to this one unified packaging model, which is then shared across Outlook, Office, Teams, and SharePoint. And then you are able to use SharePoint framework driven, so automatically hosted without Azure requirements, applications also in Outlook, using the SharePoint framework implementation, but that's a bit further down on the pipeline, so I cannot give you an exact timeline. So not in 1.15, but it's all getting planned and planned for the next steps. Good. I guess that's it from my side.